Good afternoon or good evening, where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG Show for Wednesday, December the 23rd, 2020. And as I'm talking about American politics to begin with, I will start with my, by now, customary caveat that YouTube has decreed that Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. Won the presidential election on November the 3rd, fair and square, that he occupies the office of president-elect, and that anyone who makes assertions to the contrary is a conspiracy theorist pushing misinformation, and it is not my intent to do that, and I will not be doing so. But I will mention that the election is being disputed by no less than the President of the United States, which is indeed newsworthy, because the United States has not experienced anything like this since 1876. So let's begin with the panic report, the Drudge Report. Next, proof of vax survey. 4 in 10 don't want it. Millions of doses sit on ice. Healthcare worker hospitalized after severe reaction. Study, masks block 99.9% of large droplets. Mutant strain impact won't be known for weeks. Protein very similar to HIV. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Biden warns darkest days ahead. I talked about that yesterday, that Joe Biden apparently went to anti-rhetoric school. President vetoes colossal $740 billion defense bill, breaking. Donald unhappy, unleashed, and unpredictable. White House in chaos, as staff told to disregard order to pack. So let's go to that veto. This is from CNBC, Amanda Macias. President Donald Trump on Wednesday vetoed the sweeping defense bill that authorizes a top line of $740 billion in spending and outlines a Pentagon policy. Quote, unfortunately, the act fails to include critical national security measures, includes provisions that fail to respect our veterans and our military's history, and contradicts efforts by my administration to put America first in our national security and foreign policy actions. It is a gift to China and Russia, unquote. The president added, without citing specific details. Earlier this month, the act passed both houses of Congress by veto-proof margins, meaning that any veto by Trump would likely be overridden. Congress must now vote again to override Trump. The House is slated to return from a holiday break on Monday, and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has said his chamber would vote on overriding the veto Tuesday. This year's 4,517-page defense bill, which typically passes with strong bipartisan support and veto-proof into law for nearly 6 consecutive decades. The bill's passage at the minimum secures soldier pay raises and keeps crucial defense modernization programs running. Donald Trump just vetoed a pay raise for our troops so we can defend dead Confederate traitors. Democratic leader Senator Chuck Schumer wrote on Twitter, highlighting one of Trump's issues with the must-pass defense bill. Democrats will vote to override it, Schumer added. Yes, and from a Breitbart, Charlie Spearing. The president cited the act's failure to remove Section 230 protections for large tech companies and the effort to scrub Confederate symbols from the military as part of the reason for his veto. Prior to the bill passing the Senate, Trump demanded that the bill include a provision to end Section 230 protections for tech companies in the Communications Decency Act. Again, that's not me forgetting how to read. That is Breitbart inserting the same noun twice. The Senate did not include it before passing the bill 84-13. Your failure to terminate the very dangerous national security risk of Section 230 will make our intelligence virtually impossible to conduct, without everyone knowing what we are doing at every step, Trump wrote. Section 230 allows social media companies to act as platforms not held legally responsible for content posted by users on the website. In recent years, platforms such as Facebook and Twitter abused their protections by enacting draconian censorship and removal of conservative users from their service, calling their neutrality into question. The president said, with regard to the elimination of Confederate names from military bases, I've been clear in my opposition to politically motivated attempts like this to wash away history and to dishonor the immense progress our country has fought for in realizing our founding principles. No one has worked harder or approved more money for the military than I have, he wrote, boasting that he rebuilt the military during presidency. Again, from Breitbart, Hannah Blow, Senator Lindsey Graham on Wednesday publicly supported President Trump's call for lawmakers to increase direct payments to the American people in the multi-trillion-dollar coronavirus relief and government spending bill passed by the House and Senate this week. Quote, I support President Donald Trump's demand to increase direct payments for long-suffering Americans to $2,000 a person, and I also support his call to end Section 2. Graham he has also supported funds sent to Pakistan so that girls can learn to read. What the American government is doing, of course, what the Canadian government is doing as well, is borrowing money to send to foreign countries. This seems to me to be the acme of governmental irresponsibility, but that's what everyone does now. I mean, of course, all of this money sent to Pakistan will be rigorously accounted for and in no way will disappear into the pockets of the government of Pakistan or any Cambodia or any other countries that the United States borrows billions of dollars, which ultimately have to be paid for by American taxpayers. That's assuming that this borrowed money will be paid back, and of course it won't. But no, taxing Americans to the benefit of foreigners. Let's look at Vox Day. Now, there's a reference here to a leaked Zoom call. I was unable to certify certain comments supposedly made by President-elect Joseph Robinette Biden Jr., and you guys are going to have to start working more with Hispanics who make up a larger portion of population than y'all do. Congress is getting nervous, Vox Day writes. The House passes an amendment to the omnibus defense bill in an attempt to inhibit the president's ability to invoke the Insurrection Act, to require certification be made to Congress when the president deploys active duty military within the United States during civil unrest by amending the Insurrection Act in Title 10, Chapter 13 of the U.S. Code. Alex Macris delves into the details, which amount to little more than the president will have to tell Congress why he's doing what he's doing, which is hardly a problem. And congressmen aren't the only swamp creatures getting nervous. So is Bill Kristol. And there is a repeat here of the Twitter storm by Kristol yesterday, suggesting that Trump does have a plan, concluding the first thing to look for is what, if anything, happens on December the 24th. Now, the lawyer, Pat Cipollone, Vox Day says, is the lawyer who was identified by Patrick Byrne as being the lead surrender monkey among the president's advisors. The media, too, appears to be increasingly nervous. Quote, with Trump's days in office dwindling, QAnon influencers have become increasingly restless and militant, urging him to hashtag cross the Rubicon, a reference to Julius Caesar's crossing the Rubicon River after the Roman Senate explicitly told him not to, effectively kickstarting the Roman Civil War and Caesar's dictatorship. The Rubicon hashtag wasn't new to QAnon followers who have repeatedly tweeted the phrase in the last week. But the hashtag had minimal success last week until Ron Watkins, who previously ran the message board, and Rubicon. Vox Day comments, it is amusing to observe how those who think they can keep themselves well informed by the mainstream media are always at least a month behind. Absolutely true. In any event, the congressional gambit will fail as long as President Trump refuses to sign it due to the coming end of the congressional term. A pocket veto occurs when Congress adjourns during the 10-day period. The president cannot return the bill to Congress. The president's decision not to sign the legislation is a pocket veto, and Congress does not have the opportunity to override. More on Arizona. The first of 7 disputed sets of state elections resolved before January 6th. President Trump's attorney, Rudy Giuliani, legislature will attempt to pass a resolution tomorrow, that is today, Wednesday, to certify President Trump's the winner. News spread like wildfire yesterday that Arizona lawmakers would make the attempt to declare Trump the winner today, but Giuliani said Arizona lawmakers did not have the votes today to make that happen. State legislators are being provided information that they find sufficiently convincing to put some steel in their spines, and it's now being reported publicly that President Trump is preparing to fight back, which is interesting in that it appears to indicate a change from simply refusing to concede. Several members of Congress just finished a meeting in the Oval Office with President Trump, preparing to fight back against mounting evidence of voter fraud. Once again, to be clear, while there may have been a voter fraud during the November 3rd presidential election, YouTube has decreed that did on November 3rd and occupies the August office of President-elect. Let's have a look at the chat here, see what's going on. All right. Walrus Libertarian says, Merry Christmas, and to you too, Joe Kelly's Earth. And Merry Christmas to Professor Paul. Matt Forney says, more like a dork winter as opposed to a dark winter. Ben S. is black pilling. Jim Smith says, Office of the President-elect. I take it this is a newly established office, and where is its official office space? Well, they have a great seal. They made up a seal, so it must be a little easy. Yes, they're exactly the same as Nazis. That's what I suppose. Well, the American colonists who fought against the British Crown, who revolted against the British Crown, but they won. And as the old saying has it, if treason doth prosper, none dare call it treason. Chokakin 666, press 1 for moratorium on y'all. Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Hello to you, Pearl's Letting Agency. And our valiant moderator, Chad Chadson, is in the chats. Chad Chadson says, banned. By whom? I wonder. Okay, your connection is unstable. Please wait while we try reconnecting. I don't know what else I can do. Oh, come on. Here we go. I have precisely 4 tabs open. Metal Mike says, Merry Christmas, buffering driving me bonkers. Yeah, my apologies. Merry Christmas from our Finnish friend, Jaakko Raipala. Merry Christmas to you as well. He adds the by now obligatory, gratuitous y'all. And let's get back into it. Let's see what President Trump has to say. Figure out. And we'll close that. And seeing the massive vote fraud in the 2020 presidential election, I disagree with anyone who thinks a strong, fast, and fair special counsel is not needed immediately. This was the most corrupt election in the history of our country, and it must be closely examined. Again, Twitter notes, this claim about election fraud is disputed. 2 hours ago, our additional attacks against Americans in Iraq. Some friendly health advice to Iran: if one American is killed, slow walking the signature verification in Georgia. They don't want results to go out prior to January 6th to Brian Kemp. the governor of the great state. Let's talk about sedition. Of course, the president has made entered office in January 2017. There's no question there was a coup attempt, several coup attempts against him. One of them based on the ridiculously fake Steele or Piss dossier, which was created by an Englishman associated with a British intelligence at the behest of the Hillary Clinton campaign. This is from Mediaite. New York Attorney General Letitia James told Sirius XM host Dean Obeidallah that President Trump's discussion of martial law during a White House meeting, as well as his other behavior surrounding the election results, amount to, quote, an act of sedition, unquote. I should mention that Patrick Byrne, who was at the meeting, denied there was any talk of invoking martial law. The host asked Attorney General James about Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 election, including meeting at the White House to discuss imposing martial law with pardoned felon Michael Flynn. Well, Michael Flynn is only a pardoned felon because Judge Emmett Sullivan decided that he could personally prosecute a case against General Flynn, despite the fact that the case had collapsed and the Department of Justice withdrew it. James said the days of President Trump are closely coming to an end, and the reality is that this is an act of sedition. The president is engaging in illegality, and the fact that he would consider martial law is an affront to our values and to the Constitution. How about all of those states, such as Pennsylvania, which simply decided to ignore state law in their voting procedures? Is that an act of sedition as well? James continued, and the reality is that this is nothing more than an attempt by President Trump to raise money. It's fundraising. That's all it is, fundraising, and that's all that he cares about. This is a deeply, deeply stupid woman, Letitia James. If you will go back to 2015, when Donald Trump came down the golden escalator and announced his bid for president, all of the clever clogs in the media said it was a publicity stunt. It was to promote his brand. Donald Trump had no intention of making a serious campaign to become president. Oh, and if he were nominated, he would disdain the nomination, blah, 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 blah. These people have never understood Trump, and they don't understand him now. When people like Letitia James talk about a fight to the death in terms of fundraising, this lets you know what is foremost in their minds, which is money. Not politics, not prince, God forfend, but money. Because these people, well, after they leave office, they all get paid. This is from Joel Pollack at Breitbart. Attorney General Mark Elias filed a request Tuesday on behalf of Democrat Rita Hart that asks the U.S. House of Representatives to overturn the election result in Iowa's 2nd Congressional District, which was won by Republican Marionette Miller Meeks. Again, quite the moniker. Elias, a partner at the Perkins Coie law firm, was responsible for hiring Fusion GPS in 2016 to compile the Russia dossier that led to FBI surveillance of the Trump campaign and the subsequent investigations into supposed Russia collusion. He frequently represents Democrats in challenges to election results and filed lawsuits nationwide to expand vote by mail in 2020, including the ongoing runoffs for U.S. Senate in Georgia. Though he styles himself as a defender of voters' rights, Elias is often involved in efforts to overturn the official results of elections, including Hart's challenge to the Iowa. Ever since November 3rd, we've been told, and well, the elections are fair as can be. So if Marionette Miller Meeks ends up, 6 votes ahead of her Democratic challenger, well, that's the result, isn't it? Votes were counted, the results were made known, so that is supposedly an end to it, isn't it? No, no, not when Democrats lose. As Stacey Abrams could tell you all about that. The way that the Democrats, the way that the praxis of the Democrats and the left was stated years ago by the Reverend Jesse Jackson, it ain't over, it's over, and even isn't over. But the Republicans are too stupid to understand this. What's in the bill? What's in the COVID-19 relief bill was, as I said yesterday, for CNN writes, tucked away in the more than 5,000-page long COVID-19 stimulus bill is a new law that severely punishes streamers that pirate large amounts of copyrighted content. You probably have nothing to worry about. The Protecting Lawful Streaming Act, which was casual internet users, the law specifies that it doesn't apply to people with copies of copyrighted works. Rather, it's focused on commercial. Tillis said that this practice costs the U.S. economy nearly third figure come from. It was pulled out of some lobbyists' fundament. It's my understanding that these from streaming, and I don't know how they really profit from streaming because most of these streaming services are free. And these companies are not domiciled in the United States of America. I don't declare war against one of the stands for hosting one of these companies. I would not be surprised, frankly. And again, this election is being disputed and elect, but the talk of the election being stolen is not ending. In fact, it is intensifying. It's absolutely intensifying. This is from frontpagemag.com from John Parazzo, who's the editor of the 2020 election controversy Unfold. The very same publications that spent years lying about President Trump's Russia collusion are once again telling us in the case of YouTube. The Los Angeles Times, for instance, the New York Times proclaims that Trump's false election fraud claims are founded upon nothing more than a torrent of falsehoods. Sneering at how Trump drove the lie that the election was stolen, the Washington Post mocks Republicans who are still pretending that there was election fraud. And CNN.com warns that Trump's obsession with overturning the election has now begun to spiral out of control. But so much for what the comic books have to say. What follows is a compilation of vital facts that will demonstrate to anyone interested in following the truth wherever it may lead that the 2020 presidential election was indeed rife by fraud. This is not my claim. This is the claim of John Parazzo, and that Joe Biden, if he should in fact be sworn into office next month, will be an illegitimate president from the very start. Now, of course, it's curious that the moment that Donald J. Trump was sworn in as president of the United States in January 2017, we were told that he was an illegitimate president, not my president, not the president, and that all decent patriotic Americans had the duty to join something called the resistance or la résistance, which sounds an awful lot like sedition to me. 15 years ago, a landmark report by the Bipartisan Commission on Federal Election Reform, known informally as the Carter-Baker Commission, advised all U.S. states that in order to guarantee free and fair elections, they should increase voter ID requirements, minimize the use of mail-in ballots, which remain the largest source of potential voter fraud, disallow ballot harvesting by third parties, purge voter rolls of all ineligible or fraudulent names, allow election observers to monitor ballot counting processes without restraint or obstruction, ensure that voting machines are accurate in the tabulations, and encourage news organizations to, quote, delay the release of any exit poll data until the election has been decided, unquote. All these recommendations were widely ignored in the elections of November 2020. During the months leading up to this year's presidential race, the Biden campaign assembled a team of some 600 lawyers and more than 10,000 volunteers to go into every state in order to, quote, call out local rules that don't adequately ensure access to vote, unquote. Beginning more than a year ago, Democrats filed nearly 300 lawsuits in dozens of states, and notably all of the key battleground states, in an effort to change election laws and regulations in ways that would benefit Democrat candidates. For example, they sought to A, extend the statutory deadlines by which mail-in ballots could be submitted, postmarked, or received by election authorities. B, permit people to vote earlier than ever before, in some cases as many as 50 days prior to Election Day. C, eliminate signature verification and witness requirements for mail-in ballots. D, void state laws that disallowed ballot harvesting by third parties. E, terminate photo ID requirements for in-person voting. F, introduce provisions that would allow for the curing of mail-in ballots that contained errors or omissions. And G, require state election officials to send unsolicited mail-in ballots to every person listed as a registered voter, even though such lists have long been notoriously inaccurate. Though the Democrats did not get everything they wanted, they got most of it. Part two, the implausibility of Trump's loss. While President Trump was granting interviews on a daily basis to friendly and hostile media outlets alike and was holding campaign rallies that drew tens of thousands of passionate supporters, Joe Biden, for the most part, remained locked away inside his basement, rarely even agreeing to give brief video interviews. On the few occasions when Biden did take part in interviews, he was typically disoriented, incoherent, and seemingly exhausted. And when he held rallies, they were invariably awkward, uninspired events mired in pessimistic rhetoric and attended by tiny handfuls of people. Common sense tells us that no candidate so pathetically inept and so deeply unappealing could possibly have inspired 15.4 million more people to vote for him than had voted for Democrat icon Barack Obama in 2012. Late on election night, November 3rd, President Trump led Biden by approximately 100,000 votes in Wisconsin, 300,000 votes in Michigan, 300,000 votes in Georgia, and 700,000 votes in Pennsylvania. Then suddenly, all four of these states suspended their vote counts almost simultaneously. By the early morning hours of the following day, Wisconsin had flipped in Biden's favor, followed by Michigan soon thereafter. A few days later, Georgia and Pennsylvania followed suit as well. President Trump received more votes than any previous incumbent seeking re-election, and he increased his 2016 vote total by 11 million, the largest rise ever achieved by an incumbent. By contrast, President Obama had comfortably won re-election in 2012 with 3.5 million fewer votes than he'd received in 2008. Biden in 2020 won only 17% of all counties nationwide, a record low. According to exit polls, 95% of Republicans voted for Trump. Moreover, Black support for Trump grew by 50% above its 2016 level, while Biden's Black support fell well below 90%. Trump also increased his share of the national Hispanic vote from 29% in 2016 to Iowa in 2020. Since 1852, the only presidential candidate to lose an election while winning these three states was Richard Nixon in 1960, an outcome that was likely the result of election fraud by Democrats. And this is a lengthy story. Basically, all of the data, all of the significant data, the salient data, with regard to the claims by Trump and his supporters that the election was stolen, which, of course, we know that it was not. But as I say, I am just reporting what is what an extraordinary story. Now, the Black pillars among us might be impressed by a story by an Englishman, a writer who is, fairly well-known, Pole, who's been associated with The Spectator and other publications. This is a piece from 2 days ago on the site, The Conservative Woman. We have formally convicted him, and that certainly was shoulders ago. Maybe we'll have better luck nabbing him to stand. And if it does, we can never trust the system again. This is where we are right now, James Delling Pole. Trump's lawyers have provided copious, irrefutable in favor of lying, cheating, stealing Joe Biden. Again, rather than acknowledge the shameless crime and redress the injustice, the system, the Supreme Court, even the conservative commentariat, many if not most of them know perfectly well by now that he didn't. Again, Delling Pole, not me. But because for various reasons they consider it to be inconvenient to allow justice to be done. Appeasement now, war later is how Steve Bannon's war stage to get President Trump his rightful second term will require blood, toil, tears, and sweat. But the alternative is, or the president will be a corrupt, senile, malleable buffoon in hock to the Chinese Communist Party's administration that it can do whatever the hell it likes. The little people be damned. Their Democrat opponents, the voting system will go unreformed, big tech will go big pharma, and the CCP-controlled World Health Organization, that's Kamala Harris, have spread their another satrapy of the globalist elite. All this is sorely missing from the analyses of those conservative commentators, even to Donald himself. And then in 2 years, the congressional elections should provide sufficient. If there's one thing we learned in 2020, Dowling Hole continues, is that the integrity of the system only if its constituent parts act in good faith. Supreme Court justices decide that as much as they love the power of their jobs and comfortable with their concomitant responsibilities, then suddenly all bets are off. The system is broken, perhaps irretrievably so, to its darkest hours. It's not that I underestimate the vastness of the forces arrayed against them. Rather, it's that on Ratcliffe to the tenacious, fearless 5D chess, and by extension to the free world. They will, to the cost of dealing with it, should these evildoers be allowed to prevail. My suspicion is that Trump has no long, well, by having able to say, I told you so. And back to the chat. Leponius Maximus Meridius says Kevin has a flux capacitor hidden in that fridge. Yeah, than you could in the previous config. Microwave. There's a chest of drawers. There's a television set on top of it. There's an old tube TV in the big cabinet. There's a table with clothes on it. 2 beds. You can see my luggage at the far end. Thus ends the tour of my hotel room. Anrun, would an audio-only stream produce less buffering from KMG's hotel Wi-Fi? Yes, says Leponius. This was brought up before. I really would rather not do that. I think that there are still some things that I could do with bringing the usage, CPU usage down during a podcast. Let's see, Glib Bentley says, I love Kevin and all you louts, but I gotta calls it as I hears it. Okay. Gamion enjoyed the tour. Oh, I see we've got a debate about whether I should ditch the video. What else do we have here? I believe that microwave is sucking up the bandwidth. Okay. What is the KMG show without the buffering? Well, we had, 3 or 4 months of no buffering after I went spare on my internet account, 50 times faster output. Unfortunately, that doesn't work here. But I was thinking, there is cable in this room. Because there's cable TV, and I'm thinking I do have the high-speed mode. I'm just wondering whether there's possibly a way to, if there's a cable splitter down there near the TV, of running a line to here. I will definitely look into that. Tony V says their motto was BAM, by any means necessary. Yes, that has been their motto for, decades, really. And of course, what we were told, even before the election of Donald Trump, that he was worse than Hitler. Sarah Silverman said this, that he was an illegitimate president, that he was a puppet of Vladimir Putin, and therefore any means would be justified in order to remove him from office. Any means. Glenn Bentley says, I tried No Way Out for the first time last night, only lasted an hour, couldn't feel it. Is that the one with Kevin Costner in it? The one with the, well, I won't spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it, although it must be, 30 years ago? Oh, we're talking about Albert Brooks. I love Albert Brooks. I love him to death. Uh, yeah, I talked about Modern Romance on Theater Thursday a few weeks ago. Defending Your Life, very, very funny movie. He sort of went off the rails with this movie that was shot in India about Islam. I think that could have been the last movie he was allowed to make. He's in director's jail, as they say now. Wondering Spurg says, I'm wondering how C-19 vaccination certificates will work cross-border. If a Frenchman wants to visit Canada, how will the Canadians know that his vaccination certificate is legit? I speculated some weeks ago that there is going to be a tremendous business in fake vaccination certificates, even more than the business in that Americans under the age of 21 can drink. Broadcast News. It's a good movie. It's directed by James L. Brooks, and Albert Brooks is in that. He isn't one of the leads. Holly Hunter and William Hurt are the leads. It is fascinating to watch Broadcast News just to get an idea of, and I'd recommend, if you want to know how, say, the CBS Evening News, ABC, NBC Evening News were regarded in the recent past, just watch this and you will be shocked. I mean, these newscasts, the evening news, they were considered important. They were considered vital. And they were considered to be a public service, no less, by the networks. There's also very amusing talk in this film from Albert Brooks, where William Hurt decides to make his reputation with a tearful segment about sexual harassment. And Albert Brooks comments brusquely that, oh, I see Nookie is news now. Shocking. Absolutely shocking. Okay. So let's get into it again. Do we have any more complaints about buffering? Albert Brooks is pretty close to a lead. It's really a story about all three characters. And Holly Hunter, in this movie, she's not a very good-looking woman. She is completely devoted to her work. In fact, she has a nasty personality, but she has two men, Albert Brooks, who is, really brainy, who is besotted with her, and William Hurt, who is really handsome and really good at his job as a meat puppet, becomes besotted with her. And it's really sort of female wish fulfillment. And the ending of the movie, which may not have been the original ending of the movie, or so it seems to me, it simply doesn't match the tone of the rest of the movie. Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy was good. Indeed, it was. Indeed. Alec Guinness is excellent in that, and in the follow-up, Smiley's People. Outstanding work by the BBC. They are not capable of that kind of work anymore, as we know. So let us do a roundup of the political sites. The New Phony War by J. Robert Smith in The American Thinker. As of the November elections, the nation is at war. It's a 21st century war, so it's very different because it's new. The scope and magnitude aren't easily understood. It hasn't been declared. It may never be. Hence, for many millions of Americans, perceptions are clouded or lagging. In human affairs with change, this often occurs. It's the second American Civil War, and its origins predate the November elections fraud, which seems on track to steal the presidency from the rightful winner, Donald J. Trump. Again, this is J. Robert Smith's opinion, not mine. My opinion is that Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. was the entirely legitimate victor on November 3rd. Smith continues, the genesis of the Civil War is the idiocultural war that has waxed and waned across the nation since the late 1960s. So November's election thievery might be better regarded as an outgrowth and escalation, a potentially nation-shattering escalation of that decades-old cultural conflict. We are in the initial phase of the new Civil War. Call it the phony war, which was also the strangely quiet start to World War II. The Second World War went 8 months without significant hostilities on the Western Front, months marked by puzzlement and hesitancy. See the Confetti War, which stemmed from the phony war. Nobody ever includes the Soviet invasion of Finland in this, because I suppose poor little Finland is not considered to be important enough. America's first civil, that's just a fascinating topic because, of course, the Soviet Union won the 1939-1940 war, but then there was what they called the continuation war, which I suppose not very many people know about. Interestingly, Finland went to war, didn't want to give up any of the territory near St. Petersburg. Finland was offered a deal by Stalin, which would have given it significantly more territory, I believe, in the Karelia region that it had, but it refused that offer. So let's see. How should a Christian support Trump, says Mark Lansbaum. The election is not over. The fat lady hasn't even tuned up yet. It is interesting to note that you see this tremendous divorce between what the official conservative sites, such as National Review, and sites such as the ones that I tend to quote every day. That National Review is one of the official voices of conservatism, which again is a term you should not use. You should not identify yourself as conservatives because they were born losers. But Trump is the future of the right in the United States, or Trumpism is the future of the right in the United States. And to the extent that National Review and other outlets divorce themselves for Trump, that they simply make themselves more irrelevant than they were already. I mean, I can't imagine why anyone reads National Review anymore. I read it for decades, starting in 1969. I've actually even contributed to National Review. Here's a piece from American Greatness is another one of the publications on the right, the dissident right, I suppose you could call it, who are still all in with Donald Trump. And a piece, here we go, a piece by Liz Shield in American Greatness. Here is what is on the president's agenda today. President Trump throws a wrench into COVID-19 relief by saying he won't sign bill. I don't know whether you noticed this last night, that after Trump insisted that the benefits be raised from $600 to $2,000, there was just a flood of tweets from Black people in the United States saying, we got to contest that election. Trump wants to give us $2,000 each. And there was a certain N-word was used without the hard R, that the good use of the word, that the N-words are saying that Trump is our homie now, which I find very amusing. As someone said at my favorite private site, it's not as if this money means anything anymore anyway. And that is certainly my view. Again, does anyone really think it's going to be repaid? Okay, so what's happening at the Gateway Pundit, which has been, I suppose, the biggest source of information regarding this thoroughly debunked November 3rd cheating. Joe Hoft writes, Acting Secretary of the Department of Defense thanks Vice President Mike Pence for his efforts with complex military operation. Acting Secretary of the Department of Defense Chris Miller shared this. I want to personally thank you. We've been through some stuff. We've gone through some of the most complex military operations this country has ever conducted. Let's talk about the military these days. Dana Nessel dressed up as, Dana Nessel is the Attorney General of Michigan. She's dressed up in some sort of Christmas costume. I don't know why. Constitutional attorney Matthew DiPerno was an American hero. 2 weeks ago, Michigan 13th century Circuit Court Judge Kevin Elsenheimer agreed to allow DiPerno's client, William Bailey, and a highly skilled team of IT experts to perform a forensic examination on 16 of the Dominion voting machines in Antrim County, Michigan. On Monday, Judge Elsenheimer agreed to allow the results of the forensic examination to be released to the public. The results were damning. After the forensic examination of the machines, Allied Security Operations Group has concluded that the Dominion voting machines were assigned a 68.05% error rate. DiPerno explained that when ballots are put through the machine, a whopping 68.05 error rate means that 68.05% of the ballots are sent for bulk adjudication, which means they collect the ballots in a folder. The ballots are sent somewhere where people in another location can change the vote, DiPerno explained. The allowable election error rate established by the Federal Election Commission guidelines is 1 in 250,000 ballots, or 0.0008%. Based on the Allied Security Operations Report, DiPerno states, "We conclude that the Dominion voting system should not be used in Michigan. We further conclude that results of Antrim County should not have been certified." The stunning report was widely criticized by the Democratic Party mainstream media and by the dishonest Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson and Attorney General Dana Nessel. Yesterday, the Detroit News announced that AG Nessel is planning to seek sanctions against lawyers who push to overturn Michigan's election results. How about the sanctions against the lawyers who are attempting to overturn the congressional seat in Iowa? It is unfathomable that licensed attorneys would deliberately file false and misleading affidavits. That is what they call in the legal world actionable language, and pleadings with the court in an effort to disenfranchise millions of Michigan residents. Not only should these individuals and their attorneys be assessed financial sanctions, but they should also be barred from practicing in the federal courts in the Eastern District of Michigan. While Nessel didn't mention the names of the lawyers she may pursue sanctions against, she indicated that those who filed later, after the initial allegations had been assessed and denied immediate relief, were more culpable. I think we need to go back to a time where you can trust an attorney as making an accurate and truthful representation to the court, because if they don't, then they won't be able to practice law anymore. Well, name some names. Name some names, Dana Nessel. And then the lawsuits against you come thick and fast. But of course, any lawyer who would be acting for Donald Trump, I suppose, is by definition not fit to be a lawyer and should be sanctioned and or disbarred. DC Mayor Muriel Bowser, what a very amusing name, almost as good as the mayor of San Francisco, London Breed, proclaims Christmas Eve as Dr. Anthony S. Fauci Day in Washington, D.C. Behold our new God. Joe Biden, public colleges and universities are going to be tuition free for families earning less than $125,000 a year. Okay. Because there's not enough young people spending 6 years in post-secondary education institutions. Simply not enough students. Simply not enough people being 113th in line in applications to be a Starbucks barista. More education, ever more education. That is the ticket. It has worked so well because we know that the millennials and now the Zoomers, they're earning record salaries. Their lives are more secure and fecund than previous generations. I mean, if you seek the monument of higher education, look around you, to paraphrase Sir Christopher Wren. And let's move on to, let's see if there's anything interesting in the national file. Again, one of many, many publications which is in direct opposition to the, how would I say, the loser mentality of the establishment, right? This is from Gabriel Keane. Nancy Pelosi slips unanimous consent requirement into Dems' $2,000 stimulus bill, likely rigging it to fail. What many Pelosi supporters and media outlets have failed to note, however, is that the House Speaker chose to require unanimous consent for the bill, meaning only one neoliberal Republican or Democrat objection would be needed to stop the legislation in its tracks. The move may be calculated to achieve the dual objectives of sidestepping the president's demand for $2,000 checks, while at the same time providing an excuse for Democrats to blame the bill's failure on Republicans and, by extension, the president himself. However, many pundits on both sides of the aisle were not fooled by the slippery unanimous consent requirement. What can one say? House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy has indicated that House Republicans will not agree to unanimously pass Pelosi's bill, which appears to have been introduced in a symbolic effort to one-up the president in the eyes of the media without actually intending to raise the amount in the stimulus checks. President Trump kept his promise to veto the bloated National Defense Authorization Act Wednesday, which would have given billions to foreign powers while providing a paltry $600 for Americans in the enclosed COVID relief bill. Anti-Trump Republicans, such as Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, have indicated that they'll push back against the president by forcing the highly unpopular NDDA through via a veto override vote. Oh, how about this? SolarWinds hack happened just before a company announced new Chinese expansion partnership, because definitely you want the communist Chinese involved at every level in our computer systems. What could possibly go wrong? And let's see what Scott Adams has to say, but no, again, cut and paste, cut and paste, cut and paste. I could have, done that previously, but again, I am down to 3 tabs, but my Wi-Fi doesn't like even as few as that. Okay, do we have anything here? A Mint Chip had tweeted, a better show would be if Trump won and they told Biden he was president and made a replica White House for him. I'd watch it, says Scott Adams. Move, Mitch, get out of the way, tweets Ayanna Presley, who, of course, is a member of the Squad. Scott Adams says, politics aside, this is clever. You can't stop repeating it in your head. And let's move on to J5 Keller, who is the unofficial leader, how should we say, prescient in recent years. Dan Price, Seattle, had tweeted, 1, a small business began selling camera tripods on Amazon. 2, it reached 3.5 million in sales, 0.001% of Amazon's revenue. 3, Amazon copied the tripods exactly and sold them as Amazon Basics tripods. 4, Amazon banned the tripod company from Amazon. Isn't that what they call restraint of trade? Isn't that supposed to be illegal under antitrust law? J5 Killer comments, for America to live, Amazon must die. Scott Greer had tweeted, my mom just told me that instead of sending $10 million to Pakistan, we should send 1 million liberals with gender studies degrees. J5 Killer, LOL. Michael Sebastian, retweeted by J5 Killer, gives us his Christmas wish list. Kabbalah resigns Senate. Trump invokes executive order or insurrection act. 4 more years of Trump. Traitors prosecuted. Bring back domestic manufacturing. Great reset halted. GOP rhinos thrown out. And he references a piece which appeared on Front Page Mag called Yes, It Was a Stolen Election. Again, not my opinion and not official history either. Roger Kimball, of the New Criterion, I believe. Yes, editor of the New Criterion, comments, this is the most detailed and meticulously referenced anatomy of how the 2020 presidential election was stolen that I've read, a sober yet frightening expose of massive voter fraud. I hope the 75 million who voted for Trump read it. Let's go back to the chat. Well, Metal Mike says we have plenty of terrible singers and poets in Canada, and the government subsidizes them. I know a little bit about this. I used to work for the Special Collections Division of the University of British Columbia, which contains a lot of works by Canadian poets. And I had occasion to this fellow called Bill Hoffer, a bookseller originally from the United States, who moved to Vancouver. He went to school at Simon Fraser University. He had a bookshop, and he procured titles for the University of British Columbia Special Collections Division, which they wanted. Bill Hoffer essentially cornered the market on CanCon literature. He traveled the country buying up these worthless volumes because he knew that universities would want them and he could charge top dollar for them since he had effectively cornered the market. He had utter contempt for these books, and he used to produce catalogs which were very amusing. One of his catalogs, it had a picture of Parisian whores on the street, say the 1940s, and it was titled Open for Business. Another one of his catalogs of Canadian literature had a picture of dogs at the pound on it, and the title was New Business. Leponius Maximus Meridius says, our thoughts and prayers have fixed Kevin's bandwidth problems. Mazel tov. Enron says, I haven't followed Kimball in some time. I thought he was something of a neocon. Good to hear him write that about the election. I have been surprised as well by Kimball's evolution, because I know him from the New Criterion going back decades. In fact, I quite enjoyed the New Criterion. I bought every issue for several years, but then I could see where it was going neocon-wise, and I don't know, when was it? Around the year 2000 or a couple of years previously, I just decided I can't stomach this stuff any longer. It makes me physically ill. Dan Allison says, to hell with free universities. We need free trade schools. Hurricane in Florida, you cannot get a roofer, but the poets and singers are abundant. Well, it's my understanding that Germany is a much more sensible system. That, yes, we do need plumbers and roofers, carpenters, and such like. We do not, in fact, need a gender studies degree graduates. Jim Smith says Nessel equals Whitmer's Berea. Good one. I like that. Jaco Rapala says certain Social Democrat leaders who he blamed for refusing the deal. Oh, okay. The Finnish Social Democrat Party was in charge of foreign policy, and they refused all of Stalin's offer, while Mannerheim advised to take that deal. After the war, Stalin wanted show trials for certain of these leaders. Yeah, I don't know. It is something of a mystery to me. I read about this at considerable length in the second volume of the Stalin biography, which I talked about in the book club. Mary Crow said Paul Gottfried said all political distinctions are foolish, left wing and right wing at this point. I'd like to know more about that, because I don't. Left wing does not mean what it used to mean, and the right wing does not mean what it used to mean. The right wing was against free trade, to give an example. The right wing was against atomization, choice as the highest virtue. The left wing used to agitate for the rights of workers. Remember, workers? And but now it wants more and more and more and more immigration, and is obsessed with identity politics. I'm a person who hates Christianity and thinks that Christians are voting for Trump. Too funny. Too funny. Enron says, you are right, Kevin. The ending news was changed. Perhaps it didn't. The audiences didn't like it. I mean, I'm reminded of this movie, which was one of my very favorite movies, called Deep End. And the amusing thing is, Francisco Jerzy Skolomovsky is the director. And when it was over, people were angry at the film and angry with him. And he responded quite reasonably, didn't you see where this movie was going? Did you think returns, says Glib Medley. Glib Medley, again, Kimball was one of those semi-neocons horrified by the woke movement. Okay, and moving on. Oh, yes. The decline of British Broadcasting Corporation. Steve Watson at Summit News. The BBC, bastion of all that is proper and right, has published a handy Christmas guide for how to talk down to relatives who believe in nasty conspiracy theories, and it's a huge sack full of cringe. Prime Minister Boris Johnson effectively cancelled Christmas for a third of the UK. I think it's more than a third of the UK now, and is now threatening to lock down the entire country on Boxing Day. That is not enough for the woke state broadcaster, however, which clearly feels it needs to instruct Brit NPCs, non-player characters, on how to debunk the dangerous disinformation being spread by their unmutual uncles and disharmonious descendants. How should you talk to friends and relatives who believe conspiracy theories? The BBC headline reads. You're dreading the moment as your uncle passes the roast potatoes. He casually mentions that a coronavirus vaccine will be used to inject microchips into our bodies to track us. The 5-point guide outlines, adding, or maybe it's a point that when a friend, after a couple of pints, starts talking about how COVID-19 doesn't exist. So what to do? And keep calm. Don't be dismissive. Encourage critical thinking. Ask questions. Don't expect immediate results. Critical thinking. This is the midwit. You come across this phrase, critical thinking, you are in the presence of a midwit. Critical thinking. If one wanted to look deeply into this, what kind of thinking is not critical thinking? All thinking involves evaluations of certain situations. Even the thinking that tells you I'm hungry can be construed as critical. In any event, Watson writes, so don't immediately shut them down as a dangerous conspiracy theorist who spreads fake news. Just retain that thought in your head while you deeply patronize them with your received BBC-approved spoon-fed opinion. Okay, then, perhaps chase them down the street, reaching questions about why they are not working. I don't know. We have been talking about the Roman Dr. Fauci. And in this triumph, we will see, the ancient, the anti-vaxxers and the anti-masks times, as after the triumph was finished, the problem is that the research tends to fringe YouTube videos, follow accounts. Yes, as Voinovich in one of his novels, when he was talking about Marxism as it was construed in the Soviet, in the government and nomenclatura, and he has Lenin's works in front of him, and he is grasping Marx, but not like cherry picking evidence, as opposed to the rigorous scholars change what they're curious about or skeptical of. Focus on those who are pushing these reputational gain in building a following, and of course, reporters are no interest in reputational gain. Compliments. Well, it is complex and messy, which is harder for our brains to process. I'm told that all people are equal. I'm told who says that he is now a woman is in fact a sorts of simple, ridiculous society. Let's see, Watson comments, wait, so pedos don't run the world then? And here is a line from the Daily Record. Jimmy Savile victim, BBC knew what he was doing. He molested me for a decade. That one of the greatest monsters show after show. Jim'll Fix It made him, I don't know, what the most popular, certainly the best known person. I want to look into that. too deeply at these BBC shows. Could anything on it? And the book In Plain Sight about him, which is just an absolutely shocking and I must say rather depressing book. Reading that book, one certainly gets the impression that pedos run Britain. Simon Dolan tweets, "This is, yeah, how about that? Infectious disease that occurs when a sufficient percentage of a population has become immune to an infection, thereby reducing the likelihood of infection for individuals who lack immunity." The new definition, herd immunity, also known as population immunity, is a concept used for vaccination in which a population is reached. Herd immunity is achieved by protecting people from a virus, not in plain sight. This is going on. But we're not supposed to pay attention to it because that would be conspiracy theory. That would be another example of the deadly misinformation, which I suppose is a greater threat than the virus. Oh, what does Tony Blair have to say? Why Tony Blair wasn't dragged in chains to The Hague for war crimes? Tony Blair, of course, is one of the most hated men in Britain. Oh, but he has a piece in The Independent. We are in a race against time. Okay, it'll happen. It's the only way the world will function. And for lockdowns to allow the vaccine, plus the lockdowns, plus the masks, life is wrong. And here is another piece from Breitbart about, well, it's about Clapton, who has proved himself, along with Van Morrison, to be a lockdown skeptic. What exactly is wrong with writing and singing a protest song calling for more freedom? Plenty, apparently, if your names are Van Morrison and Eric Clapton. Their anti-lockdown song, Stand and Deliver, which Morrison wrote and Clapton performs, has attracted so much violent outrage from the radical left, you'd think they just performed a benefit gig for the Ku Klux Klan. Here's a sample of the song's lyrics. Do you want to be a free man or do you want to be a slave? Do you want to be a free man or do you want to be a slave? Do you want to wear these chains until you're lying in the grave? I don't want to be a pauper and I don't want to be a prince. I just want to do my job playing the blues for friends. Sounds reasonable? No, says Delingpole. The singer is making a plea just to be left alone so he can get on and enjoy doing what he's good at, in this case, playing the blues for friends. It's a sentiment that could have been expressed by pretty much any musician since the dawn of popular music, anyone from Robert Johnson to Jimi Hendrix to Bob Marley. Yet the hatred directed toward its creators on Twitter and elsewhere has been truly monstrous. Here's Vanity Fair with a cheap shot about the musician's age and supposed health vulnerabilities. A tweet from Vanity Fair, Van Morrison and Eric Clapton, both 75, boo, and at high COVID risk, collaborate on anti-lockdown track. This is, I've talked again about the Schrodinger's cat aspect of the left, indeed, of, I don't know, modern society. Rage against the dying of the light. These same people quote Dylan Thomas. Oh, yeah, death is inevitable, right? But no, Eric Clapton and Van Morrison should be mocked because they're 75 years old, and apparently they are taking an interest in current affairs. Oh, more from Vanity Fair. Talk about an infectious tune. That's the joke. Here's someone who can't spell senile. Eric Clapton and Van Morrison don't have to work at A&E wards exposing themselves to COVID or have to teach kids who cough COVID into their faces. F these senile old twats. That's obviously coming from a teacher. Oh, the kids are trying to kill us. Here's a bad case of what psychologists call projection from Giada FBPE resist 3.5. Blah, blah, blah. I've always thought Eric Clapton and Van Morrison were wankers. Now I have the proof. Clapton performed an anti-lockdown song Morrison wrote. Eric Clapton had tweeted 2 days ago a huge thank you to everyone who participated in the I Love Live fundraising event. It's an incredibly worthwhile cause, and it was wonderful to be able to play a part in this ongoing charitable initiative. Thank you again for your support. Someone called Haxon or Rapture in R commented, "It's nice to know that it's not just my idols like Ian Brown letting me down. Oh no, not the Stone Roses, not Manchester, but my dad's idols letting him down too. He and I can bond over our bitter disappointment via Skype as we spend our first Christmas apart so that he doesn't have to die of COVID." Oh. And here, the icing on the cake is an extremely unpleasant piece of work who thinks it is funny that Eric Clapton's child died falling out of a window. Oh, yes, Eric Clapton's open window. Oh, look, and here's a little video. Of someone going through an open window. Yes, let's just remind ourselves of the subject of Real Young Crip's hilarious joke. In 1991, Eric Clapton's 4-year-old son Connor fell to his death from the 53rd floor balcony of a New York apartment. It was a horrible accident, nobody's fault, and certainly no reflection on Clapton, who wasn't even in the apartment at the time. Yet now the angry mob on Twitter thinks it's appropriate to rag up this personal tragedy as punishment for writing and performing a song whose sentiments are little different from virtually every rock song ever written. Let me be free. I don't want the man ruling my life. I just want to be left alone to live my life as I please. What's particularly bizarre is that a lot of the hatred directed against this song comes from people of an age where, in decades past, they'd have been dressing up and growing their hair in ways that upset their parents, taking drugs, having sex, going to gigs, and generally rebelling against the establishment. But here we are in 2020, and it seems as though a significant portion of the youth are actually yearning for bigger government, more regulation, fewer freedoms, and as though, furthermore, they feel so passionate about it that they're happy to vilify, crush, and abuse in the most intemperate language anyone who stands in the way of the new tyranny. Anyone who doesn't find this frightening hasn't been paying attention. 2020 is the year our freedoms were stolen from us by the technocratic globalist elite. It's going to get worse in 2021, but instead of resisting, the kids seem to be saying to their oppressors, more boots in the face and harder this time, if you wouldn't mind. Yeah, so let's go to the snafu. And keep in mind, this is an acronym. Keep in mind the original meaning of this. Will Jones at Lockdown Skeptics. High chance of Lockdown 3 in New Year's. With full-on panic settling in within government over the new mutant super strain of coronavirus, sources have been briefing that new lockdowns are coming to the UK. The Telegraph reports a swath of areas hit by surging coronavirus rates are likely to be placed into Tier 4 restrictions from Boxing Day. Ministers will announce on Wednesday. Boxing Day is a public holiday in Britain and Canada. It's not clear whether the reference to non-essential shops closing is an editorial mistake or a change in policy that's been briefed out to the Telegraph, as non-essential shops are not currently closed in Tier 3. Health officials have blamed the pre-Tier 4 exodus for the spread, odd as the new mutant strain has been found all over the country and world for several months. Yeah, how about that? The Mail wonders why PHE only alerted government scientists to the new variant in December when they had known about it since October, and why the scientists didn't then pass the information on to ministers for several weeks. I'm going to speculate here. They were holding this in reserve. It was a trump card that if it appeared that the populace was sick to death of lockdowns and was on the point of revolting against them, oh no, there's a mutant version of the virus, which is even more dangerous. We're all going to die, even more so. They could just pull out the trump card and say, yeah, lockdowns. You got it, more lockdowns because it's mutant. It's a mutant strain. Nevertheless, let's just forget about the fact that coronaviruses mutate continually. That the reason they keep having to come up with new flu vaccines is that the influenza virus mutates continually. The reason why there has never been a vaccine against the common cold, which is a coronavirus, is that it is continually mutating. The return of children to school, particularly in Tier 4 areas, is now in doubt, says the Time. It's too early for any guarantees, reports the Mail. Should we be worried about Kent COVID? Vincent Raccaniello, who is professor of virology at Columbia University and co-author of the textbook Principles of Virology, explains in a new video why he's not worried about the new virus variant. The government's evidence, he says, is all circumstantial, being based in poor epidemiological data rather than biological data, and beset with problems relying on PCR testing, which, quote, does not detect infectious virus, unquote. Thank you for that. The argument of nerve tag is completely flawed, he thinks, and he sees no reason to think this mutation is any more concerning than any of the others that have been identified. Quote, if anything, this variant is going to cause less severe disease, unquote, he says. Ross Clark in The Spectator has crunched the numbers and found there seems to be no reason to think the new variant is any more virulent. In other words, no sign of a swelling infection fatality rate, just swelling, panic, and hype. Professor Angus Dalgleish spoke to Ian Collins on talk radio about the nonsense of worrying about a new variant that has been found all over the world. Professor Dalgleish says he agrees with Matt Ridley in The Telegraph that lockdowns may actually prevent a natural weakening of the disease. David Bonsall of Oxford Vironics wrote a Twitter thread yesterday that essentially cast doubt on NervTag's conclusion that a new variant is more infectious. Further work is needed to investigate any potential causal link between infection with this variant and higher viral loads, and whether this results in higher transmissibility, severity of infection, or affects relative rates of symptomatic and asymptomatic infection. About 40,000 retail companies in the UK were in significant financial distress even before the latest measures in London and the South East forced non-essential shops to shut once again. Industry leaders sounded the alarm and called on the government to provide more support as the pound slid and the stock market tumbled over fears over a double-dip recession. Let's see. A senior doctor friend says, as the COVID miasma thickens and national speculation becomes ever more shrill, here is the update. Graph 1 shows COVID inpatients in London hospitals. And essentially, his conclusion is that, panic, which is not justified by the data. The big difference between this year and previous winter crises is that hospital staff are now being repeatedly tested for COVID, regardless of whether they're symptomatic. I understand that approximately 5% of asymptomatic staff are picked up as positive and then sent home from work. Added to the absence of staff who do have symptoms or have been told to self-isolate because of some other close contact has tested positive, and this creates a major workforce problem. And let's see, Dr. Mike Yeadon, who's been mentioned many times on this live stream, according to Lockdown Skeptics, is skeptical about the mutant strain being responsible for the NHS's capacity problems. It is my personal opinion, the doctor writes, that the only way to rescue UK quickly and in one step is to turn off the uninspected, unaudited, non-accredited private lighthouse labs now conducting 90% of UK PCR tests. They are producing deficient product, untrustworthy results from PCR mass testing. Oh, no qualifications or safeguarding required for testing children. A reader writes to Lockdown Skeptics, I would like to draw your attention to the following matter. I'm a qualified teacher with an MA in education with some 26 years experience in the state, independent, and international sectors. I now work with vulnerable young people who do not attend school. I received the email below from one of the agencies I am registered with. I'm deeply concerned about this, both as a teacher and as a mother of teenagers. This suggests that anyone can apply for the post of tester. Most professionals would not accept 10 to 12 pounds an hour as pay. Teachers regularly get between 25 to 30 pounds from an agency per hour. I am also very concerned about the training, as there are other sources suggesting this will be online. There are also quotes saying DBS checks will not be required for these people who will perform intrusive, potentially dangerous tests on children, also without social distancing. There seems to be no safeguarding, and I am appalled. Imagine if people refuse to allow anyone to test their child. The child will not be able to attend school. Let's move on to Alex Berenson. Of course, Berenson has been proved right from the beginning about this, not that that matters anymore. For all the talks about science, the bit about empirical evidence has been decided surplus to requirements. It's all about faith, really. That's what it comes down to. Faith in the proper experts, not the heretical experts. Berenson has been reporting that why isn't the Centers for Disease Control telling Americans how many adverse reactions to the vaccine are occurring? Because they have the numbers. Berenson writes, one serious reaction in Alabama, 15,000 shots, one in New York, 30,000. It appears most states are now only reporting anaphylactic shock in cases serious enough to require immediate hospitalization. Maine, 1 in 8,000. Remember, this is not what scientists call reactogenicity. Those responses are far more common. Alehi Picasso, who is familiar to me, I'll just remain Asker and general proponent of bad science because he's a serious thinker. I know Berenson isn't a contrarian any more than Wakefield was a contrarian. He's a charlatan. Berenson responds, wherein a bunch of people who have not watched the show tell you exactly what I think. 4 hours ago, hey, CDC, where's the updated adverse event data for the COVID vaccines? You have it? Why don't you release it? People are being vaccinated right now. They deserve the fullest information about the risks. Ratios seem to have changed over the years because PCR testing has swept many more deaths into the COVID camp. And it's pretty amusing. Let's see, mRNA and BNTX stock getting crushed again, despite the $2 billion order BioNTech got today. It's almost as if Wall Street is worried about the vaccine side effects. Crazy, I know. Let's see. Joseph Nicholas had tweeted 3,400 people died of COVID yesterday. The lunacy of tweeting the vaccine is the real danger is beyond words. Berenson responded, no, they didn't. 3,400 people had a positive PCR test for SARS-CoV-2 and died sometimes afterwards. Some died from COVID, some died with COVID, some died near COVID. Until we get excess mortality data and adjust it to the extent possible for lockdown deaths, we won't know. Here is the most recent COVID death in Milwaukee, by the way, 85 in congestive heart failure with Alzheimer's. Entirely typical. You want to say she died from COVID? Go ahead. Soon, everyone will die from COVID because COVID is the only really serious disease. Well, apart from racism and xenophobia. Next subject. Well, let's check on the chat. See where people are still furious with the buffering. Let's see, Jaakko Raipala, but the basic wider problem is that Germany invaded Finland during the Civil War of 19, and even though they lost and withdrew, they installed a lot of puppets in politics and the elite. I'm reminded that we can take Petersburg or Petrograd as it was at the time. Defeat the communists at source. But we have one demand. What's that? The Russian Empire has to be maintained whole. Kevin Stream. Paul Ford is a disgusting human. The tests revealing he pimped out his... You pick those who are available. Kontraku says it's impossible to productively discuss COVID-19 anymore, even as a medical expert. The public is terminally ideologically divided. Well, we've been hearing from the very beginning, trust the experts, and what the experts told us at the beginning. I know you've heard this before. Some of you may not, but it's important. Not a big deal. They said, the CDC said this. The sainted Dr. Theresa Tam, Canada's chief latrine Wallace said, not a big deal. Go about your normal lives. Exercise, common sense. Masks, No point. No point for people who are not infected. The real, the real virus here, it's xenophobia. And then they turned on a dime. They turned on a dime. Now, we have rival experts, but apparently there is a set of accredited experts and there's a set of unaccredited experts. I would think that Nobel Prize winners would be considered accredited experts, but if they do not follow the party line on this, and why is this the case? Because the elite has invested so much in the COVID-19 panic that they are never going to go back. It's only forward. Oh, look, we destroyed the economy. That was our incompetence, our arrogance, our refusal to wait for evidence. Can you ever forgive us? That will never happen. Never. As I've mentioned previously on many occasions, it's exceedingly rare for people to repent of their errors in public policy, because essentially it would mean that they would have to remain silent for the rest of their lives. Oh, yes, I told you that socialism was wonderful for decades. Yeah, it wasn't. Oh, should we ever listen to you again? But of course, as Paul Gottfried points out, a very strange thing happened with the socialists. After the collapse of the Warsaw Pact countries, the fall of the Berlin Wall, the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991, these very same people said, oh, we have something new. Multiculturalism. How about that? How about that? How about green? How about deep green policies? My suspicion is that what happened to the Warsaw Pact countries was it was a controlled retreat. But the Social Democrats, okay, we're going to have to give up power for the communists, rather. We're going to have to give up power for a couple of years, and then we'll come roaring back, saying, oh, we're social democrats now, and we have the solutions for all the problems of, post-communist world. There should have been show trials and mass executions, but unfortunately, this did not happen. I'd have comments on the Civil War stuff, but buffering ate that part. Oh dear. Contra says the establishment and their lackeys prop up experts that say what they want to hear and publish and censor those who go against the grain. Oh yes, let's talk about They Was Queens. Writer, this is from the Daily Mail. Writer defends new Netflix drama that depicts George III's wife, Queen Charlotte, as black, despite historians voicing their skepticism over theory that she was of African descent. Golda Rosheuvel, 49, plays Queen Charlotte, wife of George III, in Bridgerton. The drama is set in Regency England at the start of the 19th century. One historical theory says the 18th century consort was of African descent. We saw this with Margaret of Anjou, who was a famed medieval beauty in a recent BBC serial. Apparently, everyone in the past was black. It's just a remarkable thing that's happening. There were no blacks to speak of in medieval Europe, but we keep people into it. So let's just say that X, Y, and Z were black. Now, Pushkin claimed that he had black blood. I suppose this was pretty hip at the time. There's been claims that Beethoven had black blood. There's no evidence of this. Here's what it comes down to. Some people are darker than others. There are people called white who are actually fairly dark. Some white people have features which could be called, apologies for this, I believe this is the term, negroid features. That's the way that it goes. And it was common in the past for white people who seem to have black features or, dark skin coloring to be to be mocked. Ludovico Sforza, he called Ludovico il Moro. That is, he had certain black features. Let's see. American author Julie Wynn, whose book series of the same name inspired the show, has backed the color conscious casting. Oh, well, we all have African background, don't we? We all come from Africa. The theory that Charlotte, who was born into an descended from a mistress of playing Charlotte, is very black looking indeed. And here we see a portrait of bulbous nose. That seems to be the and wide set eye. And she has red hair. That nothing black, nothing at all. But we have to retroactively claim all sorts of historical figures for blacks, because apparently there is no period of human history, there is no place in the world that was not dominated by black people and black culture. And more on that, of course, there's black people that have elected every Democratic president since what, the 1950s. But the bill has come due. Before we get into that directly, here's a strange story from the United States that black sensibilities that their amour propre, as the French would say, must be protected at all costs. From the Mail, a black defendant's right to a fair trial would be harmed if the jury heard the case in a courtroom lined with portraits of white jurists, a Northern Virginia judge has ruled. The upcoming trial of Terrence Shipp on charges of eluding police will be held in a courtroom that has no portraits on the wall, said Fairfax County Circuit Court Judge David Bernard. Bernard noted that his usual courtroom has no portraits. But jury trials that were postponed during the coronavirus pandemics are now being held in larger courtrooms. The walls of those rooms are lined with portraits of retired judges who are overwhelmingly white. Boo! Public defenders raised the issue in a motion titled Motion to Remove Portraiture, overwhelmingly depicting white jurists hanging in trial courtroom. While to some the issue of portraits might be a trivial matter, to those subject to the justice system, it is far from the case, Bernard wrote in his ruling issued Sunday. So the very sight of white people is now offensive to black people. Can we make that reciprocal? Because I could live with that if it became reciprocal, but of course it is not going to be made reciprocal. So I mentioned the new senator from California, Alex Padilla, a political hack of the first order. This is from Joel Pollack at Breitbart. Alex Padilla Senate pick divides Latino black leaders in California. Padilla will be the first Latino U.S. Senator from California. However, black leaders had urged Newsom to choose a black woman to replace Harris, who has been the state's first black female member of the Senate. Well, kind of black, and one of the first nationwide. ABC affiliate KGO in San Francisco quoted the Latino Community Foundation. We're just so glad Governor Newsom made a historic pick because one of our own is going to the Senate to fight not just for the Latino community, but for all of us. However, the amusingly named San Francisco Mayor London Breed, the first black woman to hold that post, said, "This is a real blow to the African-American community, to African-American women, to women in general." She had been a candidate for the post because she'd done such a bang-up job as mayor of San Francisco, along with Representative Barbara Lee, whom some had considered an outside candidate to be Joe Biden's running mate. Newsom compensated somewhat by nominating Assemblywoman Shirley Weber, chair of the California Legislative Black Caucus, to replace Padilla as Secretary of State, making her, yawn, the first black woman in that position. Let me just check this here, because actually it is Latinos who are the big, important voting bloc, particularly for the Democratic Party in California. It is not, in fact, blacks, and blacks have been Some people claim that they've been chased out of South Central LA, Watts, by Hispanics. There have been actual turf wars there. So California is 6.5% Black or African American, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, circa 2018. How do you have a veto power over appointments in a state when your people constitute 6.5% of the population? This is hubris, straight up hubris. Oh, and more trouble for Joe Biden on this regard. And this is this supposed leaked Zoom call. This is from Ryan Grimm in The Intercept. Democrats in the House, Senate, and around the country have been urging President-elect Joe Biden to use the maximum amount of executive authority available to him in order to grow the economy, expand civil rights, protect the climate, and otherwise implement the agenda he ran on, despite the expected obstruction from a Republican Senate. And the civil rights leaders are already displeased, including, the Reverend Al Sharpton, yes, who fomented actual honest-to-God pogroms in New York City. Biden had a warning for civil rights leaders. That sounds dangerous. Let's see. NAACP President Derek Johnson warned that appointing Tom Vilsack to be Secretary of Agriculture would anger Black farmers in Georgia, as well as Black voters generally in the state, for whom Shirley Sherrod was a hero. Sherrod was fired by Vilsack from her position as Georgia Director of Rural Development for the U.S. Department of Agriculture during Vilsack's previous tenure as Agriculture Secretary during the Obama administration. Her firing was quickly revealed to have been a mistake, yes, a political mistake, and based on an incomplete airing of a video by the late conservative provocateur Andrew Breitbart. Particularly in Georgia, Johnson noted Vilsack's capitulation was still a sore because, yes, Black people they speak of little else but the Department of Agriculture. And nominating him would be disastrous electorally. If you consider the victory that you appreciated in Georgia, it was around 12,000 votes. And so as you consider appointments, you must also consider what impact would that have on voters in the state of Georgia. And I will submit to you that former Secretary Vilsack could have a disastrous impact on voters in Georgia. Shirley Sherrod is a civil rights legend, a hero. Yeah, that woman that no one has ever heard of is a civil rights legend and a hero. Civil rights, this whole battle was won by 1969. Complete 1969, but somehow the civil rights movement still exists. One is reminded of the story, perhaps apocryphal, that as late as the 1850s, the British government was still paying watchers on the cliffs of Dover and such like to look for French invading ships. And, I want to talk about this fellow who has a YouTube channel and he makes satirical videos, who I find very amusing. I was rather surprised, actually, because he's a young fellow, J.P. Sears, he's called. He's a ginger with long hair and a beard. And he made a video 4 days ago called My Apology to Facebook. And it is both funny and disturbing. He appears in the video. It's revealed. The joke is that he is tied to a chair, as if he is a prisoner. Dear Facebook, I am sorry. You let me know that I'm on the verge of being banned for violating your community guidelines. And I want you to know, I sincerely apologize for the violation. I want to make this right. Facebook, you provide tremendous support for creators like me and creating meaningful, positive content. But I unfortunately made a huge mistake of exercising free speech and trying to help people better their lives. I now realize both of these things are in direct violation of your community guidelines. My only explanation for my actions is that My parents raised me wrong. I grew up believing that helping people was a good thing. My parents also raised me to believe that exercising free speech, which is a constitutional right in the country that you're based in, is a constitutional thing to do to help me grow towards having the kind of integrity that you embody. I pledge to you that I will ban my parents from my life starting today. That's my commitment to you, Facebook. Facebook, I'm sorry I violated your community guidelines. I now realize that truth is a direct violation of them. And I promise I will never speak any of it on your platform ever again, in hopes of growing into a stronger person who's allowed to stay on your platform. Accordingly, Facebook, I solemnly pledge to only speak about things that are in accordance with the mainstream narrative that's currently destroying our country. And I will not encourage people to free themselves from the fear of a disease that's currently terrorizing the world with a 99.98 survival rate. And I will not suggest that there's proven treatments for the disease that are highly effective for the people who do get it. And I won't mention how you censored doctors on your platform from speaking about such treatments, none of which have anything to do with a needle full of an experimental cocktail of a DNA-altering substance. Facebook, with your threat to ban me from your platform, you also mentioned that if I publish a correction statement to my audience with corrected information from your fact checkers, that it would help my standing with regard to being able to stay on your platform. Well, Facebook, I would be glad to deceive my audience, manipulate their thinking, and disempower them with your fact checkers, facts that are based on your political agenda. You strong-armed me with fear and to portray my audience because I'm afraid to be kicked off your platform. Well, you know what? That's the kind of leader I want to be to my audience, one who bows down out of fear in the face of tyranny. So I'll do it because I know I'm nothing without you, Facebook. I'm scared enough to believe that. So here goes, dear audience. I'm sorry that I shared my thoughts with you. I never should have done that. And you should be terrified. It's not okay to live free from fear. Do not think for yourself. Keep your businesses shut down. It's good for you. And do not let your children play with other children. And don't you dare risk any level of self-responsibility with your health and well-being. And for God's sake, do not risk any level of human connection. Humans are bad for the human race. Me, I'm a leader who aspires to uphold the values of the great Facebook. I hope that was a good enough correction for you, Facebook. It felt empowering to be less authentic with my audience, more aligned with what you stand for. Finally, Facebook, as a comedian, I can tell you that your censorship is great for comedy. There's a comedic principle called truth, and comedy means that there has to be at least some truth in order to give rise to comedy. And therefore, to make people laugh and smile, and your dedication to censoring truth takes the truth out of comedy. And therefore, you also take the comedy out of comedy. And I think that's good for comedy and good for humanity, because we all know that comedy is a pandemic harming humanity. But Facebook, if you can just inoculate enough people with your control, then you'll be protecting all of humanity from comedy and truth, Facebook. Please accept my sincerest apologies and regret for violating your ever-changing community guidelines. I stand with the rest of humanity, and knowing that we don't need you, you need us. I mean, you don't need us as we need you, because we're nothing without you. I hope that's clear. I also hope you can get the Facebook community guidelines to eventually replace the Constitution of the United States, because the Constitution is in direct violation of your community guidelines. Thank you, Facebook. Again, this fellow can be found for now at YouTube at Awaken with JP. I have seen several of his videos, and I must say that I was very pleasantly surprised. One called What Radical Leftists Are Like Now. That is to say, they suck up to big money and big government. How to raise weak children during lockdowns. I quite like that one. Why small businesses should be closed forever. Again, very amusing. Very amusing fellow, and I highly recommend him to you. Let's have a final look at the chat. Media says, this guy Sears is pretty sarcastic. I think he knows Facebook really does not play much in his livelihood. His wife is Amber Sears, a California-type life coach. Though he is a ginger. That is true. That is true. But yeah, Jim Goad. I don't want to talk about Jim Goad. Clapter from here on out, says Visionary Companion. He has over 1.5 million subscribers, says Tricky Who. Gamion says he has a good video on why California is a shithole. Mary Crow says, I'm shocked he is still on YouTube. I'm kind of shocked I'm still on YouTube, frankly. I guess we're talking about Al Sharpton here. Sorry, the Reverend Al Sharpton. Chogokin666 says he looks like a deflated football or a deflated race hustler, says Tricky Who. I've just talked about Al Sharpton in the past, and it is, I don't know, you could look at the career or the apotheosis, if you will, of Al Sharpton as a single data point denoting the terminal decadence of American society. That this fellow has a platform. This fellow makes money for being on television and is not in prison. No. That all of the leading lights of the Democratic Party, once a year, they go down on their knees to him and kiss his ring. Again, this is a fellow who actually fomented 2 honest-to-God pogroms in New York City. None of this, okay, Pushkin may have been 1/8 black, says Visionary Companion. Sure, I don't have any problem with that. But what is the relevance of it? What is the relevance of it? Okay. And it was, famous gay composer. And George was homosexual, but he never married. So I suppose that is sufficient. Funnily enough, I haven't seen these claims of Handel being a homosexual for quite some time. But if we're looking at who's at the top of the poll, that's always, there's always a struggle to get to the top of the greasy pole. In America now, it seems to be blacks and transsexuals. So that's it for today. What is coming up on Thursday? Tomorrow is Theater Thursday, and I'm going to be discussing Christian Carrion's film called Joyeux Noël, which is about the Christmas truce during World War I. And on Friday, Christmas Day, I will be broadcasting. I'll be doing something a little different. I will be opening with the book club, by which I mean, after an introduction, I will be reading in its entirety Leo Tolstoy's moving short story, What Men Live By. And then, with the time remaining in the broadcast, we can talk about other things. I'll be back on the air tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. If you like the show or any part of it, I would greatly appreciate it if you click on the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you have not done so already. If you would like to make a donation to this live stream, which would be exceedingly appreciated at this time of me being, not homeless, but not having any permanent address. And, I'm going to have to find one because I can't live for very long in a hotel. As I say, if you'd like to help me out, my PayPal account is attached to Kevin_Grace@hotmail.com. Once again, Kevin_Grace@hotmail.com. If you're Canadian, you can send a donation to me directly via Interac at kevingrace@shaw.ca. And as always, I shall leave you with this benediction. In these times of social atomization and, indeed, civilizational collapse, I do dearly wish that you, my dear viewers and listeners, manage to forge a genuine human connection in order to ease the burden. Good night.